When you are looking at a totally greenfield environment for VMware running on Nutanix, you need to do quite a few settings inside of vCenter. I'm logged in on the home page of vCenter here, and I am running vSphere 7, so you can see right here vSphere 7. The first thing you need to do is create a new data center. Right-click on the vCenter server on the top left and do New Data Center. Give your data center a name. It's typically a good idea to name your data center based on the location that the data center is physically. Your data center appears underneath your vCenter server. Right-click on your data center and do New Cluster. Here you want to give your cluster a name. It's also a good idea here to give your cluster name based on what the Nutanix cluster name is as well, so that way you know things can match up. Hit the OK button. With your cluster, we need to make a couple changes before we add your hosts. The first thing is to go and enable EVC mode. So under Configure, go to VMware EVC, then on the top right, select the Edit button. You want to enable EVC for the processors that you're running. I'm on an Intel host, so I'll select Intel CPUs. Then select the least common denominator for the CPUs that you're going to be running. I'm running Broadwells, but if you're running something else, please select those. Select the OK button. Next, you'll want to go to add your hosts. Right-click on the cluster and do Add Hosts. From here, add the IP address information for all the hosts that you're going to add. You can add multiple at a time. Then type the username and password to log into the ESXi host locally. And a pro tip up here at the top left, select the Use Same Credentials for all hosts so you don't have to type out the password multiple times. Select the Next button. Accept the fingerprint for all the hosts. Then go Next and Finish. vSphere tries to put the host in maintenance mode when adding to the cluster. Since we're running Nutanix and they have CVMs running on all your hosts, they cannot enter maintenance mode. You'll see down here that it actually failed for 2 of my hosts. Go ahead and click, hold, and drag them onto your cluster, then let go. And do the same thing for any remaining hosts. You'll see the hosts are then added to your cluster with the virtual machines and my vCenter server appliance. Now we need to configure your hosts so that they're ready for production use. Select your first host, go to Configure, and then go to TCP IP Configuration. Then select the default stack and hit the pencil icon for editing. Edit the information as appropriate for your environment, including the hostname, domain, and DNS information. Then hit the OK button. Next, we need to configure NTP. With the host selected, go to Configure, then Time Configuration underneath the System section. Then in the NTP section, which is in the middle here, on the right side, hit Edit. In the new window, we need to check the box to enable NTP, then input your NTP servers, either the IP address or DNS names. Select the checkbox to start the NTP service, and change the dropdown for the startup policy so that it starts and stops with the host. Then hit the OK button. You'll want to do those steps for all of your remaining hosts, and if there's any other specific configurations you need to do in your environment. The next thing you do need to do is configure vSphere HA. We do that by going to the cluster, then go to Configure, then select vSphere Availability. On the top right, hit the Edit button. Tick this box to enable vSphere HA. Then we need to change Datastore with PDL to Disabled, and make sure VM Monitoring is also disabled. Then go to Admission Control on the top tab. It's recommended to configure this based on your redundancy factor setting for your cluster. Since I have a 4-node cluster running RF2, I need to make sure I can withstand at least one host failure. So I need to define my host failure capacity by 25% of both CPU and memory. Then go to Heartbeat Datastores. From here, you can either select your individual storage containers or data stores, or you can automatically say select some. I'm going to go ahead and manually just select this one data store. Even if I do add other ones, I only want this one to be the dark heartbeat data store. Since I am only using one storage container, I need to go to Advanced Options, select Add, and then put in this DAS Ignore Insufficient Heartbeat Data Store option with the value of true. Then hit the OK button. Next, we want to enable DRS. So under Configure, go to vSphere DRS, then select the Edit button on the top right. Check the tick box to enable vSphere DRS. Leave automation level at fully automated. Typically, you'll want to leave your migration threshold in the middle and only change it if you need to based on how heavy or how light your migrations happen in your environment. If there's any other options you want to configure, go ahead and select them now, but this is all Nutanix requires. Then hit the OK button. Once DRS is enabled, we'll now need to set some overrides for the CVMs. With the cluster still selected, go to Configure, Configuration, then VM Overrides. Select the Add button. Then we want to select all of your controller VMs. Every CVM needs to be selected and configured this way. Then do Next. We want to override DRS first by disabling it, because we don't want DRS to try to migrate the CVMs to other hosts. And we want to disable HA for the CVMs. So under vSphere HA, select the VM Restart Priority and check the Override button and set it to Disabled. Then scroll down to the bottom and select VM Monitoring, check the Override box, and set it to Disabled. Then hit Finish. And you should see that DRS is disabled and HA is disabled. The next thing you want to do is manage your data stores. Go to the Data Stores view on the top left, select your data store, go to Configure, and make sure that Storage I/O control is disabled. Mine is by default. If yours was enabled, select the Edit button, check the box to disable Storage I/O control and statistics collection, then hit OK. That's all that's required from Nutanix. As a housekeeping measure, it's generally a good idea to make some folders for your storage, so that way it's easier for folks to kind of understand what is what. So we can put Nutanix storage and another folder for local storage. These drives here are local to my host. That's just the SD card that the ESXi hypervisor is installed on. You don't want to run virtual machines off of that. So click and drag those to the local storage folder and then never use them again. If you make more storage containers, you can drag and drop them into the Nutanix storage. So that way it's easy to find where your actual storage for your cluster is. You can do the same thing if you go to virtual machines. Although this is not a required step, it is totally optional. Make a folder by right-clicking on the data center, new folder, and do new VM and template folder, and just call it Nutanix CVMs. Click and drag your CVMs into this folder, and that way you know that all your CVMs are in the same spot, so it's easy for you to monitor them. And since you should not be messing with your CVMs, it's easy to just ignore everything that is in that folder. Now you can go and start creating virtual machines and using your cluster as you need. Go back to your hosts and make sure all of your hosts are configured exactly the same as how we configured the first one. Once your hosts, clusters, and storage is configured correctly, we need to go to your Nutanix cluster inside the Prism interface. In Prism, we need to register the vCenter server. Go to the gear icon on the top right. Then on the left side, under Setup, go to vCenter Registration. You'll see that it's already detected the vCenter server because it knows from the host that they are connected to vCenter. Select the Register action. Input the administrator username that you used when you created your vCenter server. And of course, the password. Then hit Register. it will reach out and talk to the vCenter server so that Acropolis and vCenter can share information more easily. You can see the task has completed and vCenter is now registered with Acropolis. You can now begin using your vSphere environment with ESXi 7.0 and Acropolis 5.17.1 or newer.